This is Big Man Tyrone, and you're about to watch the MtG Cabal Cast with your hosts, Woad, Thirsty, and Reptar. Sub to us on all your podcast networks at MtG Cabal Cast and YouTube.
All right, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast, part 2 of part 1 that we started last week, which is kind of getting into some peripheral stuff that's going on as we get into something that seems to happen every year. Magic Finance slows down a little bit. We hit the annual reserve list spike, which we'll touch on over a couple episodes starting next week. And today, last week, we'd kind of gotten into other card games and stuff that people were getting into, and today we're going to get into something a little more esoteric, artist proofs, prints, original art, stuff like that, as well as some examples and stuff like that we've got. So let's get started on other market stuff.
So as far as Magic art is concerned, there are a number of avenues to kind of pursue this. There are artist proofs, there are artist prints, which we'll demonstrate, and then there's also Magic art and original Magic art, which is kind of weird, but it's basically like one of them is the art that actually made it to print. The other one is some concept sketches and things like that move forward. Those are hard to come by, but they do exist. And it's kind of an avenue for people to pick up cards, sometimes to have them altered without actually having to alter the actual card itself, because it's a cheaper version of the card when you get a proof or a print. Sometimes it's just an easier way to approach that card and pick it up. Other times it's for collections and things like that. As far as art is concerned, this is actually, I would say, as strong a market as graded reserve list stuff. Yeah. Magic art has some very deep pockets supporting it, and it's not just the famous pieces. It's anything that's been kind of available over the last close to decade. There are a number of people who were into misprints that eventually moved into art. There are a number of people who, over years, as this became more popular and individuals started seeking out those artists, that became more prevalent, and so Magic art has kind of spread around. If you watch a lot of content creators that have been in the game for a while, LSV, Matt Nass, I believe Huey Jensen, they all have some form of Magic art behind them, be it a full original piece or an artist print. And it's just this kind of interesting way to support and kind of show your love and flair for the game itself.
And it's interesting to see because it's one of the few collectible spheres where you have not only your MTG financiers, but also actual players and pros who are moving into the financial aspects. If you're in any of the Magic art groups, MtG Art Market on Facebook is one of the main ones. Eric Froelich posts on there all the time. Yeah. He's got, here's the stuff, I'm listing wife in picture for scale, looking to buy this stuff, and it's really interesting because it's less accessible than just general Magic Finance, but it's more accessible in terms of demographics because it's not just your high-end people. You have people that come in and they're like, hey, I don't know what the price is going to be. I'm just looking for this piece. And then they find out what the price is, and it's like $10,000, and they're like, okay, well, can I get a print? And then all of a sudden they're on a website or someone says, hey, I have a limited print. I'm going to go ahead and forward this to you, or in the case of artist proofs. And it's something that there's that universal appeal because no matter what you get between an artist proof, a print, or an original piece, which, original Mountain Goat behind me here, it's a piece of Magic history. So it kind of resonates with that nostalgia that you don't necessarily get in traditional Magic Finance. Because, like you said, you get these old players, Huey, LSV, Froelich, Kai. Kai is also active in the art community, and they have this like nostalgia, and it's a way for them to express it. And I think that it's interesting to see that as this has happened over the years, now we're getting to a point where when we reach the Magic downtime, so to speak, you see those markets explode.
Oh yeah.
Because you have less need for paper cards because you're not playing as much, but you want to feel like part of the community. So you get the artist proofs, you get the prints, you get the original pieces, just to say, hey, that's great. Here's some of my nostalgia.
Oh yeah, we were talking about this before the show last week. There was a confluence of events a couple of weeks ago where the original Baron Sengir art finally went up for auction. Pete Venters, the artist, had the original piece and put it up, but at the same time, you mentioned there was just this other insane auction of original Magic art that came through. That
Demonic Tutor.
Yeah, that downplays Baron Sengir, but it's just now we're seeing all this kind of come to light, and we're seeing artists kind of come back to the game or being represented by people with a love of the game enough to get them to do prints of Magic art and for a game and or an organization that they have kind of disassociated themselves from as well. So there's also that kind of unique bit of collectability. You know. For myself, some of the stuff I watch out for is like original art from the game that I fell in love with when I first started playing. So behind me, every couple of weeks, I put up another proof that I have, and the one I have from an artist that really loves the game but hates the company is Melissa Benson. So I have a set of numbered prints for Shivan Dragon, Nightmare, and Lord of Atlantis, and I also have the playmats that go with them because this was her return to Magic art for the first time since the early 90s when these pieces were commissioned. And she went and kind of revamped them as well and did some quote-unquote original pieces in her current style as if she had been given that artist request, that kind of layout for WotC of what they were looking for. And those are actually starting to come to light as well. The art directions are now starting to pop up as well for these pieces from the early 90s, which is also pretty interesting to see.
That's actually, in Goat, there's a letter right here that I'm pointing to. That is actually Cornelius Broody explaining how art design worked in the early days. And it's something where you see now people talk openly about what the art direction is now. And that was something that, Wizards was too small to care about. And it's interesting to see how that process has evolved over the years. And you do have artists like Melissa who are coming back and they're saying, well, all right, let me see how my style has evolved. And they're not really repaints necessarily.
No.
But they're trying to give an affordable access to new people.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting because it is something that has the potential to be infinitely more accessible than Reserve List.
Yes. Because
you can do it whenever.
Mm-hmm.
You can do these repaints. It's as simple as exchanging an email and saying, hey, you have the rights to the art, but I can sell prints. I can sell repaints. I can sell all of this stuff. And they just have to do it. The one snafu, actually, that happened not too long ago is in the art group. The artist posted the originals of the Godzilla lands.
Oh, yeah.
That's a little more complicated because it's a licensed property. But it's just interesting to see how that works.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you track that then? Well, there's no TCG player. There's no Card Kingdom for prints or art. The closest thing you have to that is originalmagicart.com, which doesn't have a list of prices. And this is where this facet gets really interesting to me, is a lot of times it's literally someone curates a spreadsheet of public sales and just has a list of what sold when and for how much. And in the art group, that's readily available. There's a couple of artist-proof communities where that's readily available. And there's even artists that just static on their website. If you want an artist proof, it's this much always. So it's interesting because the market is so much more decentralized. So it's kind of harder to track these movements.
Mm-hmm.
But the flip side to that is those communities are significantly more welcoming and open with the exchange of that information.
Oh yeah, it was amazing how easy it was for me to once I found the groups to just find essentially the agent that dealt with the artists that I'm looking to work with. And in that time, I've picked up my prints. I think we both got a set of Mox enamel pins at Vegas.
I got 2 sets.
Yeah. And it's interesting, like, the enamel pins are amazing. I think it was the second run of these, and this time they were actually made for mass because they look really good. But we were joking about how inside the enamel for proof of authenticity is actually a foreign black border artist proof basic land that is signed and numbered.
Pretty great.
Yeah, so this was an interesting twofer. It's a nice little gift that nobody was told about. I just found out the morning of the first day of the GP when I picked up my order. And the enamel pins are something that's picked up as well. I think I have the Demonic Tutor one. And it makes this evocative art just available for people in a number of ways that aren't just a playmat or a t-shirt anymore. You can own, effectively another piece of the game. If you want to own a piece of history, you can, as long as the art, still exists. There is that problem that some of this stuff just does not exist anymore. It was destroyed in one way, shape, or form, or WotC owns it because their contracting with artists was pretty interesting and has changed throughout the history of the game. But it is, as you said, wide-reaching and one of the more unique ways to kind of embed yourself with the game. And the financial implications are there, but hard to track. Is it Tales of Adventure that every now and then buys art? They'll flag their booth, or is it Galactic?
So Caffrey has some. It's the one that's out of Arizona that Dustin Ochoa runs.
Okay.
They have a rotating selection of art in their store that's literally just his personal collection. And he'll bring it to booths, and he'll buy art at booths and everything.
Yep.
So it's, that's another way that it's accessible, is that you can't just literally go to a GP and see it there.
Yep.
And you can trade cards in for it.
Yep. The representative for Melissa Benson and Dan Frazier has done that before at Grand Prix New Jersey. There are a handful of proofs available and a number of original art or magic art playmats, all limited in quantity and I believe either numbered or signed. And if they weren't, you could have them signed and numbered there because the artists were there. And it's become this interesting avenue for investment or another alternative way to enjoy the game, in all honesty. The only thing that it does kind of hamper you is that, sadly, artists do pass away, and when they illustrate such things as Black Lotus and Lightning Bolt, their proofs, their prints all go up in value and they become harder to find or much more expensive, but that does speak to kind of the legitimacy of this market, is that interest as it builds, and then especially in the passing of an artist where there will be no more released, it becomes an asset, an appreciating asset.
And it's, I wanted to give an example basically of how the art market has evolved over the last year. So I have here the original sketch for Portal Pyroclasm. When I originally purchased this, I paid $50. That's it, $50. And I just sold it a couple days ago for the homie hookup to a friend for $200 when I had an offer of $300 because I just wanted to help him out. And that's the type of thing that you're seeing in these markets, is those people are moving into more of that aspect. You get an explosion, and it's just something that you may want to dabble in, because honestly, I firmly believe that stuff like this, it is, despite being not beholden to the RL, in a lot of cases it's basically reserve list proof.
Yep.
If you get a sketch or something or a numbered print, they're not making more of those. So they may do another run, but oftentimes when they do another run, it's a different material, it's different color correction, it's a different size, it's a different
pen used for the signature and the signing.
Yeah, or in some cases the artist's signature changes completely. So it's pretty interesting to see.
Yep.
And I think that it's something that's worth at least keeping an eye on, because it is something that you can just passively observe, and when the moment is right, you know what, I could get a UC, or maybe I could get this one of one piece of Magic history, or one of 20, or one of 30.
So as far as items go, we talked about prints and proofs, and artist proofs are Magic Art front, white back. And they are usually limited to X number of copies per the artist, and once they're out until the artist wants to make more. And it's never all the cards that they illustrate. And sometimes you find that you'll get the masterpieces or some other high-end kind of exclusionary art like that done as an artist proof, which raises the roof on that card entirely, because at that point, as you just mentioned, they will all be signed and numbered, and there will be a limited number of them forever. Unlike a print, where that can be rerun by the artist or whoever owns the original, the proof, it's only when they decide to make them, and if they decide to stop, that's it. There was a time where Mark Tadine had monodrains and time vaults at his booth in the early to mid 2000s, and now you can't find them. No. That's it. The Chris Rush proofs were only done again in the early to mid 2010s, and then they were gone. And they're extremely difficult to find now. As I mentioned, I think, who did the original Birds of Paradise? Was that Ed Beard?
Poole.
Mark Poole?
I thought that was Mark Poole.
Okay.
Ed Beard did seven, I think.
Ones. Yep. I think those are both sought after, but Mark Poole does more than Ed Beard. I think Ed Beard has switched games entirely. Yeah. Mark Poole will still come out to Magic events, so you can still get those proofs. And, they're... If you wanted to pick something up that's a little more wieldy in regards to size, or can be even more scarce, the artist proofs can be the way to go. A lot of that, though, has to be handled in person at the event. It's very rare that you'll be able to get them from an artist directly outside of dealing with them face to face. You will see them on Facebook and art groups, absolutely, and a lot of times they'll be alters as well. Yeah. Because, like I mentioned, you're there, the artist is there, you can see what proofs they have. Like, they have, they have what I need in a proof. I want to get it altered and have a play set of it, so I'll buy 4 proofs and have them altered as well. And it's also a way to kind of pay the artist a little more directly than just giving a tip for signing, which is absolutely direct payment. But the proof is kind of a roundabout way to also pay for the alter and the tip in one.
And it's also interesting because that is a market which has actually been affected by COVID. So the production and everything is still handled by the same company that prints Magic, still Carta, and they can have shipping delays. So I had ordered a altered artist proof of Emery, and I had her draw Ophelia Drowning, which is one of my favorite classical pieces, and that's what it reeked of to me. And I commissioned that altar to it. It wasn't until about a month and a half ago that she got the Throne of Eldraine artist proofs. So that's another market that's kind of interesting and unique aside, has been affected by shipping delays, and that is something that can play upon that market. So, that may not be the case with art or prints because the artist pretty much handles all that directly, more or less. Whereas with artist proofs, you're kind of beholden to the wizard's timeline. So if that is something you move into, it's just something to be mindful of that you need to stay on top of. To say, all right, well, I guess proofs are something I should pay more attention to. Maybe in a month after the set, I'll check to see if the proofs are up on the artist's website.
Yep. And suffice it to say that artists are always listed for every type of event you go to, be it a Magic Fest or a Mythic Championship. I believe they usually have a couple there. Just, Comic-Cons, anime conventions, etc. You will actually find game artists everywhere. And if this is something you're interested in, you can keep an eye out. And as you broaden your scope, you'll find that it becomes a lot easier and a lot more fun to get into. The art for the things you love. You don't have to just buy the random poster. You can actually buy prints and proofs directly from the artist. A lot of them also have websites too. So if you don't see anything listed, you can also just reach out to the artist directly and see if they work that way. I know, as I mentioned before, going through an agent is generally the way to go for a lot of older artists in the gaming community. They go through one or two of the same people.
Yeah.
So, anything else?
No, I think that about covers everything I wanted to get to here.
Yeah. I don't think there's really you mentioned no TCG, etc., but I don't think I've seen anything on like eBay or stuff like that.
Heritage Auctions actually has been getting into art and prints.
Okay.
And that's, mostly a no centi thing. Because they're trying to legitimize magic art.
Mm-hmm.
Because Heritage has a history of video game art, pop art, movie art, stuff like that. Comic sells, everything. And that's kind of been the first place that you've really seen outside of eBay an established auctioneer taking hold of some magic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the Scheherazade original went up on there not too long ago. And it's something that periodically happens, but that is something that's starting to be more and more in the high-end auction market. That's just something worth taking a look into, because obviously at that point you have buyer's premiums and everything else.
Yeah.
So the price inflates drastically.
Mm-hmm. And that, as you mentioned, that's where you're going to find a lot of that original iconic stuff that still exists. It's not going to be proofs or prints that you're going to find there. You will find the actual original art for these pieces there. But it's like I said, it's pretty interesting. It's pretty fun, and it's also reasonably priced when you're getting something that is kind of new to the scene or something that's coming up for the first time. Everything's generally fairly reasonable. I think for the set of Moxes that I picked up, I paid maybe $125 or $150 for all 5 of them as prints. The stuff from Benson was $50 for the 5x8s. If I wanted to go larger, I could have. And basically, at that point, I was just paying for the additional canvas space on the prints. And it does require a bit of a bankroll to move into a lot, and I mean like multiple pieces. But for prints and proofs, but otherwise, you can just pick and choose what you want, because everything's so selective. And you mentioned earlier, Evros and other people have been like, this is what I'm looking for. Does it exist?
Yeah.
And then that's when anybody who's in these groups that has any kind of knowledge will kind of come through and speak up on it. I joked a while ago that I wanted to pick up Astral Slide and Lightning Rift original pieces, but I don't know if I want to shell out 5 digits for that stuff. Exalted Angel, Eternal Dragon, put the deck together in original art.
That would be pretty sweet, though.
It's just a little too rich for my blood.
For sure.
But, good.
Pics?
Yes, sir. All right, I want to take this one because you went first last week.
Yeah, sure.
So my pick this week is the amazing sweeper, Living Death.
Yes.
So I'm bringing up Living Death on EDH Rec first, just so you can see. It's in 10% of all the decks that have black on EDH Rec. This is a sweeper with a heart of gold, and I'm looking specifically at the Tempest version of this card, where this art was only used 3 times. And so if we take a look on stocks, it was really flat until about Ikoria, and then it started to tick up from, about $5 to $7. And right now we're trending upward again, despite a downtick. And this is a card that right now is 7, has the ability to climb to 10 and 15. And it has survived a handful of reprints. The reason I like the Tempest art is because it's the original, and of the 3 ways to get this, it's the only one that isn't foil and doesn't have a colored set symbol. So, Living Death, as I mentioned, was printed in a number of sets. One of them is an odd one called the Battle Royale, which used the original art for all the cards, but gave them the appropriate rarity colors. So the Battle Royale art actually has a gold Tempest symbol. And there's also a Judge promo that uses the Tempest art, and it's foil, and it's not that expensive. It's only like $50, $55 if you wanted to get in on it. If you could pull it in from Europe, it's $23, and I would absolutely arbitrage that thing.
Yep.
Man, get that guy over here. But this has been printed in the original Commander set. It was in the anthologies. It was in Dual Deck Phyrexia versus the Coalition, and it was in From the Vault as well as Masters 25. So it's seen a number of reprints, and it kind of ropes for a while if you look at the stocks graph. But the more varied the EDH format gets, and the more creature reliant it becomes, something like Living Death becomes a premium spell because it works in a number of facets. I want to call this unconditional removal, and people usually use that phrase when you just destroy a creature, no conditions attached. Does no color requirement, no power toughness. This is a sweeper that gets around regeneration, like Wrath of God, but it also gets around indestructibility, like Bane of the Living, Killing Wave, and Black Sun Zenith. But it also functions as a reanimation spell, so it fits a number of niches within the format. It plays a number of roles. So in any kind of control deck, this is kind of a no-brainer if you want something non-conditional, especially if you have a way to deal with graveyards. You know, if you don't care about reanimating something and you have a Rest in Peace in play, just do it. 5 mana, just clear the board entirely. Nothing's coming back. If you're playing a reanimation strategy, well, then there you go. You just have to deal with somebody else's graveyard or have better targets, and now you've cleared the board and just dumped all your threats back into play. Right? So this is kind of a two-way player in this regard. This is also a card that sees cube play for that same reason, or those same reasons. If you watch any LSV video from Cube Season or Marshall, they will talk about this card when they see it and whether or not the deck they're playing is a Living Death deck, because it is either a control deck that they're going to be playing, and maybe they're going to tuck away a Shieldred in there or something and they want to get it back. Or if it's in the Reanimator strategy, because you can play kind of a quote-unquote longer game and attrition your stuff to the graveyard without having to worry about having the cards Reanimate, Exhume, Recurring Nightmare. You have Living Death. And in that deck, compared to a lot of other cube decks, you're just going to go completely over the top of whatever anybody else brings back. It's kind of like the card Patriarch's Bidding in that way. When you cast Patriarch's Bidding and you name your creature type, you know that what you're getting back is going to either end the game there or be more powerful than whatever anybody else can get back. All in all, I think this card has a 6 to 9 month time frame on it before it goes past 10 and most likely closer to 15. As we know, it's not really going to be reprinted anywhere. We just have to hold our breath for the Zendikar Commander decks. I don't think this is a card we're going to see in that set because they haven't reprinted it as a sweeper. They've been relying more on red for that recently in the EDH decks. And if we dodge the reprint like I expect we would, that gives us almost another full year for this card to just sit there and accrue value. And for 7, now getting out at 15 in a couple months, I think is going to be the easy call on it. If you wanted to go in on foil, there's it's also Mystery Boosters. Forgot that one. The only foils of this card are, like I said, from Masters 25. They're about $8.50 right now. And the Judge promo, which is about $55 in the US. If you can get it from the EU, they're about 23, 25 euros. If you have a way to arbitrage this card.
And the awful From the Vault version that doesn't exist.
Yeah. I forgot about that. The FTV version is the new art. So, it's
bad.
It is. The original Commander art uses the same art as Tempest. Sorry, there's 4 ways to get the original art. One of them's Commander. So I'm sticking with the Tempest version, but if you have any connections into Europe and you can arbitrage any amount of any version of this card, I think it's just a windmill slam on that.
Yeah.
They're literally 50% across the board. Every copy.
And the interesting thing is if you look at the Judge promo on TCG Player, Card Kingdom sold out, Miniature Market sold out, Cool Stuff is sold out. There's only 6 listings left on TCG Player. And there are only about 58 listings on MKM, but a lot of those are at the 50% rate. Mm-hmm. So it's a pretty good opportunity to just arbitrage it over and then sell for profit.
Yep, and give it some time. Like I said, I think if I would go in on the Tempest version because it's, like I said, the oldest. It still has the uncolored rare symbol compared to everything else that isn't the Judge promo. But if you have the pockets for the Judge promo, that's the one I would go for. And if you have any way to arbitrage, then I would start with Europe and then move stock over to the US. This is not a card that's played in any kind of constructed format. You could call Cube constructed if you want, but that's about it. It's Cube and EDH.
Yeah.
And if you can get your hands on those copies that are 50%, you're going to win now. You'll win later, too.
Yeah.
The delta on this is just... It was narrowing. I think we're not quite at a great spot to just step out. It's 380 450, which is up from when I initially did my research. And all it's done is climb. Card Kingdom's still buying the same amount now as they were when I first started watching this card. But this is where I would be.
It's a solid one. I like it. It is, like you said, a very casual type of thing. And that's something you can rely on almost always for a market that grows. I also think, like you touched on, it's not the type of effect that Wizards is prone to printing lately. So I think it's good. Plus, Tempest, they're not going back to that old art. Every printing since has been the new awful art.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I've got a pick this week that kind of harkens back to what I'd mentioned last week, which was reserve list foils. And I mentioned kind of soft reserve list and stuff like that. I'm specifically going for the old FNM promo, not arena, Llanowar Elves. The reason being, it's original art, it's old border, it's foil. And I started watching this card a couple weeks ago when I noticed some of the other high-end RL stuff had started moving, because I always like old promo foils. You can look back at historic picks, and I pick them a lot. So the reason I decided to pick this week is because specifically the near mint listings have dropped now to 5. This is something that was at about 20 3 weeks ago. The overall listing has not declined at the same rate that the near mint has. And what this means, when you look at it, to me, is you have people slabbing this card. You have people that are collecting this card to finish out global sets or stuff like that. And that means whales. That means people at the upper echelon. And the thing that does is when those people move in and they take the ceiling off, all of a sudden everything else rises up, because it can. Because now your near mint copies, maybe $37, $36. Well, when you look at your LP, they're going to be about 28, 29. All right. Well, when those $37 ones disappear and all of a sudden that price goes up, you'll see everything else start to dry up.
Yep.
As some people may get a grade that they don't like, they'll just snag another one, whatever. And that's the type of thing that you'll notice when we enter RL summer, I guess we're going to start calling it from here on, since it happens every year, is your soft RL items, like old border foils, tend to spike. So it's definitely something that I think is worth paying attention to. And I think that this is something that when you see these slabs start to hit, this is a slow burn. When near mint dries up, it's going to be a while before you get a return. So this is more of a long-term thing.
Okay.
But it wasn't too long ago that you were seeing these in booths for $40. And then we got the full art, awful FNM? Was it FNM? I don't know. Whatever that promo was that they did, that was the full art, no text box type of thing.
Oh, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Is it Game Night? No, not Game Night. Open House, that's it. It's the Open House
promo. Yes, that's the one. And if you look, the last time that this card saw a huge spike on the stocks graph was in the spring of 2018, which was the original reserve list boom. And that's when we hit about a $40, $50 market on it. And it's gradually trickled back down to the point where we're sitting at around 30. Well, prior to that, it was sitting pretty at about 10, 20 bucks. So if the same behavior continues, then when this corrects, it's a correction, not a spike, you'll see the floor raised a little bit on everything else. So whereas you may get those LPs for 30 now, they'll probably be about 40 to 45 at that point. And that's when you would want to pounce. So you're looking at, based on last time, maybe about a 5-6 month return.
Okay.
But
I do want to point out the timeline of the spike is really serendipitous, because it happens between IMA and Dominaria. And so
Yep.
the average starts to tick up on this card, but not the market. What drives the market into the spike is the news that it's reprinted in Dominaria. So now you
Yep.
have this card floating in Pioneer, Historic, and Modern. So players, as far as I know, nobody's ever asked me for the F&M promo. They bought the game day promo because that was accessible, or beta when that was still accessible. So
Yeah.
speaking to the collector side of this thing, absolutely. Lending legitimacy to this is the fact that it hasn't really come down after that spike from it being in Dominaria and now approachable by those formats. So I think had that not happened, we'd be having a different conversation about this card, but because it is now more playable and constructed and has been given a home in more formats, this makes sense overall, combined with the fact that it is a star foil. It's the original art, and you're not going to get either of those anymore. After this, I would expect the Arena promo or whatever, the WPN.
New border, old art, whatever that foil is.
Yeah. I would expect that to go because it is old art, and it has the Magic stamp on it. It's not a star foil, so I don't know if it's easy to see on stocks here. It just says Magic behind the text box, and it has flavor text, whereas the original does not. So I would expect that one to be the next to go, and I don't think a $30 reach for a card like this is that hard an ask. Like if this is a card you want to play in any way, shape, or form, you do you. If you want a card that's going to raise in price over time, then yeah, absolutely shoot for this in near mint or LP, whatever you think you can get.
Yeah.
I like the pick overall. It was interesting to know. I didn't realize how few there were on TCG Player until you said something about it.
Yeah, and it's interesting to see because paying attention to foils like that, I haven't really noticed too often when that happens with near mints, and this was the first time it popped off, and I was like, oh, well then, I guess it's true.
Yeah.
Got to go for it.
Yeah,
so
that's why similarly, that's why I started switching over to just checking on TCG Player the combined LP near mint population for the cards I'm tracking, because it's interesting to see that there's a lot of noise going on a lot of cards just because there's such a large population, but when you hone in on what people usually buy to play, if they're not just looking for the cheapest condition, you have a lot of shrink in light play and near mint. And something I didn't note when I was talking about Living Death was we actually lost like 30% of the population of that card between when I posted in the Discord and today. And it doesn't sound like a lot, but that was from 22 down to 15 combined LP and near mint for Tempest. So everything else that's available on TCG Player is in a worse condition or foreign. So that just gives you an idea of the fact that there's more nuance of the data you're looking at, and you really need to hone in on what you're looking for. If you're looking at trying to beat out whales, then going in on the near mint foil and watching the near mint foil is the way to be, especially on these reserve list cards if you want to try and get ahead of those people. The moment you see the population of near mint and LP start to dip, that's it. You got to make your move, otherwise you're just going to be behind and possibly miss. So
yeah, and it's worth keeping an eye on, because if you can get ahead of the whales, your margin is significantly better. Mm-hmm. You may not move as much, but the one you move, you'll make more on than, if you'd bought in a little bit later and moved 20.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
but I think that's going to be it for this week, guys. Next week we will be back to talk a little bit about that kind of reserve list summer, what we're seeing, and how to handle it and what's going on. Some of the comparisons to spikes prior. But until that, we are at MtG Cabal Cast on Twitter, Patreon, Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, and Apple Music. Podcast, not music, podcast. We don't make jams yet, but
one day,
maybe. You can find me.
You kind of do.
That's true. I'm going to Nash to do that next week. It'll be thrilling.
Nice.
Otherwise, if you want to reach out to me directly, I am at HaltIamReptar on Twitter. You are
at Thirsty Sizzler.
I'll see you guys next week.